everyone. All right. Does anybody here kind of feel like a Monday morning after a really good weekend? That's great. So I hope I'm not going to bore you to death more. I'll actually try to do the opposite. So, hi, I'm Kate Hobler. As introduced here, thank you so much. I am a trainer, a coach, a consultant, basically someone who comes into companies, or actually, sorry, companies call me and say, hey, Kate, help. Yeah? Something's happening, I don't know what is happening. So I come in and try to figure out what's happening. I'm kind of like a Dr. House for the companies. And sometimes it feels like that. It's actually quite amazing. Privately, I'm a mom, I'm a stepmom, and if you wish to play some board games with me or Magic the Gathering, I'm up for any format. So, yeah. All right. So, let me ask you the first question of today. Do you know what this is? Apart from being a clay tablet and being quite ancient. It is Sumerian, that's right. It's somewhere in between 6,000 and 4,000 years old. This is actually a homework of a teenager from Sumerian times. It is a letter to their mother saying, shaming her into not working well enough or hard enough so that they can afford better clothes. Sounds like today's teenagers? Very much, huh? There's actually one more, but I couldn't find a picture of it, where there actually is an adult man saying that the world is crumbling because the youth are not obeying. From the same era. Yeah? That also sounds a little bit like today, right? Anybody has a teenager at home? Few, okay. Anybody still remembers their teenage years? Okay. I hope your memory is pretty good, because we're going to go through it. All right. So, how companies are adolescents, how companies go through adolescence. And I'm going to show you a model, Larry Greiner's model. I like it a lot, and this is actually, in practice, one of the most used tools in my professional practice and working with companies. Larry Greiner, some years ago, he observed quite a few companies, looking at how they develop in size and how they develop in age and what happens on the way. And he found some patterns. Those patterns are that there are actually some phases that a company goes through, and each phase is kind of finished up by a crisis. And that crisis, if solved, if it does not destroy a company, it allows the company to progress into another stage and by that mature a little more. So let's take a closer look at those stages. What happens and what kind of crises do companies encounter? At first, the companies are super creative. Imagine a startup in that mythical garage of the parents with 3 or 4 close friends that are developing something amazing. It might be some software, it might be a game, it might be baking cookies. Yeah? The only limitations that you have is the size of the garage and possibly size of the oven, if we're talking about cookies, right? So there's no limits to creativity. So it's booming. You're coming up with the best ideas ever. And you're really, really worked up about this because this is amazing. Everybody loves creative work. This is something that fuels the best parts of our brains as people. It's the same with young children, right? They're super creative. Especially about 5 years old. There's nothing a 5-year-old cannot do, right? But the problem is that there is a point at which that creativity needs to be kind of led in a direction. if we're not leading the creativity into a direction, suddenly it kind of disperses because we run out of ideas, or we pursue so many ideas that in fact it's impossible to financially sustain the organization, the company. Yeah? So it just ends. Some data shows that somewhere close to 80, in between 75 to 85% of startups don't live through their first year. And this is because of that. They fail to set direction. Because it is direction that is the cure for so-called crisis of leadership. The fact that there's no leadership, no visible leadership. And I'm not saying that it has to be a single leader that just shows the direction. It might be a collective leadership effort, but that direction has to happen at a time in order to monetize whatever they're doing, instead of just relying solely on founders, because that money is going to run out eventually, right? And this is actually what my husband did with his first startup. This is exactly what happened. Yeah? But if we don't fail to set direction, if we don't fail to establish leadership in a company, they go into kind of their pre-adolescent stage. Because the pre-adolescent stage, phase 2, is so-called direction, which we're actually directing. There is somewhere to go. And it's a huge advantage over the first phase, because it's not only creativity is still there, but this time that creativity is directed somewhere. Yay! We have a company that's working. Great. But in that situation, a leader or leaders, while the company is growing, they face a serious problem. At the very beginning, all of those leaders were capable of performing virtually any task in a company. So if they were coders, they were probably coding. If they were marketers, they were probably marketing. If they were UXers, they were probably UXing, and so on. And they were doing all this stuff, but suddenly there's so much work that they're not able to do this all on their own. They're starting to work 9, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, plus non-payable weekends, and so on. And they start burning out. And this is the moment when the rest of those startups usually fail. Not the rest, but another group of startups fail. And I did the same. I worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because weekend is just like another day. It's just not disturbed by customers, right? So I was working like this, and I was really, really, really close to a burnout, and a really bad one. Fortunately, we had a pretty good coach come in and work with our team, and he said, "You." Like, me? "Yes, you. You're going to Australia." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, you're going to Australia. End of year, maximum to the half of the next year, you have to visit Australia." I'm like, I always wanted to visit Australia and New Zealand. Actually, why not? So he presented to me as a challenge, and if somebody presents something as a challenge to me, I just take it up. That's who I am. So I took the challenge of actually going to Australia. I found a partner to go to Australia. Actually, my mom was my partner, and we bought the thing, the organized excursion thing. And you know what happened? With 2 months before that trip, I needed to delegate absolutely everything I did, because I would be absent for almost a month in a time zone that was 12 hours apart from what I was usually. That was a beautiful thing he did there, because I needed to delegate absolutely every aspect of the company to somebody that I knew was capable, and I knew I had a capable team. But I was really, really having trouble delegating it to them. So when I went to Australia, I went with a clear head, and I actually had a little over 3 weeks of pure leisure, exploring amazing views and Hobbiton and many other things also in New Zealand. This was great. So this was how our company went through the crisis of autonomy, so-called. Because this is crisis of autonomy of the company itself. Because the leader or leaders are hoarding so much work that the company is not autonomous and it cannot be autonomous. So this has to be kind of liberated in a way that actually those leaders delegate. So when you delegate, your company starts growing on its own. So you're kind of letting go. This is where the adolescence stage comes in. Anybody knows what this is? Anybody familiar with that? Anybody saw the Inside Out movie by Pixar about emotions? Huh? Yeah. This is Riley's control panel that the emotions work on. Yeah? It's actually quite simple because this is how simple operating a small company is. The problem is that when it starts growing in this phase, and there's a lot of growth in this phase, just like a teenager, you kind of think, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Yeah? This is exactly the same with a company. It grows very rapidly because people are free to make decisions. They are in the delegation phase. They're learning delegation and they're delegating on their own. So this is the rapid growth. So few months later, your control panel doesn't look like this, but it looks like this. This is, by the way, from the Inside Out 2. Right after Riley started being in adolescence. So in this part, in this case, is that, yeah, there's a lot of delegation, and suddenly your company is dispersing in many different directions. Because somebody is delegating here, the other's delegating here, the other's delegating here, and usually these parts don't even touch. They're like bubbles in a company. And sometimes they don't like each other, just like teenagers. And this is the moment the company failures are the most spectacular. Those are those startups everybody believed in. They were so hyped. They were those unicorns, and suddenly they're gone. And everybody talks about the management errors that were made, and the problems in financing, and the long-term strategy that didn't work. And everybody's doctorizing about this, but in fact, what happens is so-called crisis of control. This company like this is not controlled enough because it's spreading very thin, it's going in multiple directions. Even though we're saying as a company we want to achieve something like this, the company is unable to do that because pieces of it don't really like each other. It is a bunch of teenagers at that point. It's really hard to manage. There is a solution, but it's a really hard solution. A solution is coordination. So you are not managing kind of, picking people and moving them around. You have to coordinate large pieces of company so that they start working together. You start building processes, you start building guidelines, you start building internal laws, you start building kind of programs that are supposed to put it all together. You're working up your bureaucracy. Kind of like a teenagers again. Yeah, you sometimes have a curfew, you sometimes have rules. You cannot have unspoken rules with a teenager. Once they have them at home, probably know that if you ask a teenager to bring back the plate after the dinner, they are going to bring back the plate, but they're not going to put it in the dishwasher. But if you ask them to bring back the plate and then put it into the dishwasher, they are going to put the plate into the dishwasher, but not the fork. If you ask them to put the plate and the fork into the dishwasher, they are going to do this, but in the wrong place. If you ask them to put the fork and the plate into the dishwasher in the right place, Even if the dishwasher is full and there's nothing else you can do, they are not going to turn it on. So very, very clear requirements. Same with companies here. They need it. Oh, that was supposed to be the slide, sorry. So with that phase, that bureaucracy grows and grows and grows and grows. And this is the moment we're starting to feel, are we a corporation yet? Are we in the rat race? Like right now? But we were a startup like 3 years ago. Sorry, this is how companies develop. And what happens in that development is that at first you are very kind of laid back and you have lots of freedom. But you see that this freedom is destructive for a company, so you move to the other side and you give less freedom and you give too little freedom. So then you move into a little more freedom, that's a little too much, then a little less freedom, that's a little too little, and then suddenly about a few cycles you're right about there. But you make that mistakes. This is quite common. So after the coordination phase, where you do that coordination and then you start building up your bureaucracy, you build it up a little too much. And you get into so-called red tape crisis. The red tape crisis is when your bureaucracy is so huge that you cannot move anymore. Nokia, anybody? And few more places that we can tell. Yeah, we can name the companies that failed in here. This is late adolescence. This is when people start to try to control themselves so much that they don't give them room to breathe, themselves room to breathe. So what's the cure? Collaboration. Getting rid of lots of bureaucracy and moving into the collaboration phase. And we did that as well. We created too much bureaucracy. In fact, we had 3 people doing nothing in a 10-people company. I mean, sorry, not adding value. They weren't doing nothing. They were very busy. Yeah? But they weren't adding value. So a question. How long does puberty last in humans? So what's the earliest a puberty can happen? Do you know? Apart from, of course, like one of few cases that happened once, kind of once in the history of Earth. The usual earliest is 8. So if you have an 80-year-old, technically they can start being prepubescent and pubescent. How about the other side? How long does it last until, the majority, the 3 sigma of puberty, when does it end? Do you know? I'm pretty sure the majority of you are below that age, because it's 40. Yeah? A puberty can last up until 40 years old. Not 14, 40. And of course, not the majority, because the majority goes from like 11 until 20 or something like this. This is the most common puberty. But it can stretch from 8 up until 40. And this is based on research by Marek Kaczmarzyk, who is researching adolescent brains and how to teach them. So he did a lot of research on how adolescents actually, how does that happen and how long does it take? Yeah? And it's the same with companies. How long does each phase take? From a week, probably, to several hundred years, depending on the company. Yeah? So you cannot tell only by the size or the length and the age of the company. Another thing is, do you know what the first sign of puberty is? Let's assume boys for a moment. Anybody knows? Good, because it's impossible to tell. Same with girls. Some start with one, some start with the other. Yeah? Some guys start with a pretty big lump of hairs, like somewhere here. Yeah? Some start with pretty interesting dreams. Yeah? Some girls start with shaping up, and some girls start with some changes in their mood. Yeah? It's impossible to tell. Same with companies. It's impossible to tell when something will happen, and it tends to get mixed up. But crises are important. Crises are needed in order to leap forward. What does a crisis do? They point us to a problem that we are currently having. Sometimes in a pretty fireworks-like way, but sometimes it's a little more silent. But a crisis allows us to spot a problem and then work with it. If we didn't have a crisis, we probably would not see it, and then we will go into the boiling frog state, where we suddenly slide down and we don't know why. So crisis actually is something that allows us to advance to a next phase. Same with a teenager. If you're having your next argument with a teenager, even though you think that this is having no more sense, they're having no sense whatsoever, no more. Teenagers rarely make sense. But when they hit 25, they come back to you and say, hey, remember that argument we had? Yeah, what about it? You were right. Yeah? So again, arguments and crises are important. So what do? You embrace it because you cannot stop it. Just like you cannot stop puberty, you cannot stop the development of your company. Even if your company stays the same size, consistent size, it's always 50 people, it's still going to go through those phases. Because you cannot stop time. People are going to try to develop whatever they're doing. So, sorry, there's no going back. Just embrace the change. In theory, it looks like this. Yeah? If your company is growing fast, it looks like this. So those crises are starting to almost be on top of each other. Have you ever worked for a company that you felt were growing too fast? I see some people, to some extent. Yeah. And if you're growing too fast, these crises are going to go faster. But that's the theory. The reality looks a little more like this. Because some of those can be switched, some of those can never even be visible at all. Because, if it comes to in one of the crises, or actually the crisis of leadership, in our company was like, I was working with 4 people, and we were really in that phase when we were super creative, and then we didn't really have direction, but somebody asked me, hey Kate, what's our direction? And I said, there. Okay, yeah, we've moved into the direction phase. Sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it kills companies. So why am I telling you all this? Why am I showing you that this model, in fact, does not reflect reality? It does. Every single model reflects the reality, but to an extent. It's a simplified version of reality. Being aware of it, awareness, the fact that you can actually spot the problem, that you can, based on this model, that you can tell which phase you're in, what to expect next, what is possibly going to happen next, makes you prepare for it. Letting your people know that something like this happens, and this is the Greiner model, and you can use it to spot possible problems, to spot issues, and to watch out for the fact that because we are now in the delegation phase, there is a crisis of control that is going to happen, we just don't know when. Let's prepare for it. If your people are going to be vigilant about it, you will be able to act on it much, much better. Yeah? So, once we are in the corporate phase, so we're the big corporate entity that has some bureaucracy, but maybe not that much. It's very comfortable to work with or work in. Are we safe from crisis? What do you think? No, of course not. Because if we look closer, let's look at that new team that has just been formed. That new team with a new leader. What happens there? First phase. An upcoming first crisis. And when it grows as an organization inside of our corporation, it is going through all of those phases. So inside of a large company, there are multiple teenagers as pieces of that company. So you need to be aware of that at all times. It's like a snake that bites his own tail, like the Ouroboros. So better learn how to spot it. If you learn how to spot it, if you understand how you can actually work with that model, you will be capable of protecting yourself in your company, in everybody that you're collaborating with, from falling into one of the crises that is going to kill your company. Instead, it will enable you to go through that and thrive as a great leader and as a great member of the teams that make up a great company. That's long-lasting. And I wish that all upon you. Any questions? There might be none.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. You can get it. Guy?
I have gone once, but I have gone through 4 of them already, just with this company. But my company still develops, so we're looking at the 5th soon. 15 actually. In our case, that's about 15 years. This is how long the company lasts. I mean, it's not formally, because formally we're a 10-year company because we changed the way we're organized formally. But yeah, it's 15 years, and we're past first 4 crisis, and we're looking at the next one and trying to not repeat the 4th one because it sometimes happens. Right now, we actually had to shrink a lot because right now we're only 2 people full-time. We're collaborating with about 30, but they're different and separate entities. But the biggest we have ever been was 11. Yeah, but still, in that size, we were able to go through 4 of the crises.
Thank you very much. One more time for Kate.